I call this Mayor and Council work session for July 25th, 2022 to order. I'm Mayor Kurt Wilson, and I'd like to acknowledge the council members present. Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland, Councilmember Dr. Vanstrom. For the record, much against my wishes, I have to announce Councilmember Michael Palermo has an excused absence. Also in attendance is our City Administrator, Mr. Randy Knighton, our City Attorney, Mr. David Davidson, and our City Clerk, Marley Press. Thank you, Marley. The discussion for this work session is bond projects. I'd like to now begin the bond project discussion by turning it over to Ryan Luckett, our Finance Director, who'll give us a brief recap presentation of what has taken place so far in the bond process, and then I will open it up to council to discuss the projects further. So, Mr. Luckett, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be very brief. Just wanted to recap where we are, where we've been. So as you know, the Mayor and Council approved 3 resolutions calling for a bond referendum back on July 11th, just a couple of weeks ago. That included 3 separate questions that will appear on the ballot, with the idea also of finalizing a project list by August 22nd. And this would be for the election date, November 8th, 2022. The 3 questions that were approved at July 11th included 1 for recreation and parks, bicycle and pedestrian paths and sidewalks for $107,600,000. A second question for public safety for $52 million, and a third question for a public parking deck at $20 million. So total for all 3 of $179.6 million. Our next steps really is just this discussion today. We also have time reserved if needed for the committee meeting tomorrow. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, for whatever discussion we need to have.
Thanks, Ryan. That was a very cheap way to get out of that, having to say much, but we're respecting your usual tactics there. I'd like to open it up for discussion first by the council before we get into specifics. Council, any thoughts before we start our discussion on this particular area? All right. There being no particular thoughts, let's get into the first bond, which is the $107,600,000 bond for the recreation parks, bicycle and pedestrian paths and sidewalks, ballot question 1, of which you can see on the handout here. There is the first 4 items all relate to the completion of the total of the River Master Plan, the Riverside Park, Roswell River Landing, Azalea Park, and Don White for a total of $24,700,000. Just to be clear, that is the completion of the Roswell River Master Plan. Just for edification, Phase 1 and Phase 2 in the ASAN project for the River Master Plan is part of the FY23 budget. This 24/7 is to complete the grand scope of the Roswell River Master Project. So 24/7 of the proposed 107.6 for the recreation parks, bicycle and pedestrian paths and sidewalks ballot question is the River Master Plan. Then, as you can see, if you can skip down on this a little bit, Ryan, that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 projects specifically outlined here underneath recreation and parks, with there's an additional one, which would be number 12, for miscellaneous park improvements and land acquisition. And you can see that the first 11 projects are listed here, starting with East Roswell Park, estimating $8.6 million, 7 Branches Park, estimating $2.5 million, Groveway Community Park, estimating $4.8 million, Woodstock Soccer Complex, estimating $3 million, Hembry Park, estimating $10,200,000, Roswell Area Park, estimating $20 million, Oxbow Trail Connectivity, estimating $3.3 million, Grimes Bridge Park, estimating $1.3 million, Waller Park, estimating $2 million, Big Creek Park, estimating $1 million, Smith Plantation Trails, estimating $3.2 million. And then the final miscellaneous park improvements and land acquisition, estimating $3 million, for a total of $62,900,000 specific to park improvements. So we got 24/7 for the completion of the River Master Plan. We have $62,900,000 for park improvements. And then we have an additional $20 million specifically outlined towards the bike and pedestrian master plan, for a total of $107,600,000 on ballot question 1, recreation parks, bicycle and pedestrian paths, and sidewalks. Thoughts or questions? Dr. Vanstrom.
I would love to have Mr. Leatherman come up and walk through a few of these if he could.
I think that's an excellent job, Peter. Thank you, sir. Mr. Leatherman and Christine, floor is yours.
I'll follow with a follow-up question on the bike ped sidewalks.
Outstanding. Yes, sir. Floor is yours, Peter.
Well, speaking of the bike ped, what can you define the Oxbow trail connectivity, how that's different than the bike ped plans?
Sure. So the Oxbow Trail Connectivity Project, $3.3 million. We're looking at how do we connect Oxbow Road to the trail system that is currently, I would say, connected and then inhibited by Big Creek itself. Right now, if you walk past the waterfall coming upstream from Vickery Mill Fall, you run essentially into a dead end that becomes a pipe crossing to cross the creek in 2 locations. This connectivity project allows us to connect the trail along Oxbow Road, and we have a linear park there at that location, by 2 bridges that would then allow you to direct access or directly access from Oxbow Road the Vickery Creek waterfall system. Probably about 6 months ago, maybe right about the first couple of meetings of this newly elected mayor and council, we sent in or applied for a grant that was a feasibility study for those 2 bridges. And we haven't heard back from that grant itself on the design side. This is our cost estimate associated with the 2 bridges based on other projects that we've built previously.
Outstanding. That sounds wonderful. What's the now the question too about the Smith Plantation trails? Is that at all inclusive of the connectivity to City Hall?
Yes, so that was part of our budget estimating associated with the trail system here at City Hall, connected across to Smith Plantation, over to Norcross Street. We did a briefing with this mayor and council maybe about a month ago looking at that trail system. Was also directed by this mayor and council to start to look at some more innovative, I would say, and creative ways to get down the elevation change from the current Hawk crossing that was newly installed on Highway 9 down in and around the Smith Plantation area and City Hall. So we took those cost estimates and then applied it to this line item here.
Just to follow up on the Oxbow question. So right now there is one bridge that connects from the Oxbow parking area to that recreation area.
Correct.
And we're going to add 2 more, is that
correct?
Right? One where that big pipe is?
Yeah, there's essentially 2 pipes, and we would similarly align to those 2 pipe area crossings. So the current bridge on Oxbow, if you're coming down from, say, the water treatment plant or from Waller Park, there's a bridge that enters into the National Recreation Area from the city road itself. That will drop you into the trail system that then is, give or take, probably about, the quick walk would be about a 2.5-mile walk to the covered bridge further downriver. This would essentially, these 2 bridges would allow you to create a complete loop of that system. Right now, it's an out and back process. So you would walk to the covered bridge, you would access the Vickery Fall area, perhaps, come into the historic Roswell and then turn around and go back, roughly the same path that you would travel. So these 2 bridges are a little bit downstream of the existing bridge crossing that is there across the street from, John Lewis Drive. And would cross Big Creek in a more direct route to the top of the waterfalls. but ultimately you would have a complete kind of circular walkway or circular trail system with those two crossings.
And what about, would this include any additional parking? Because that area is, we're opening it up, but it's pretty much full, the parking lot all the time that's down there now.
Yeah, you've got about 30 to 40 parking spots that are currently there in the gravel lot. We did not anticipate any expansion associated with this line item. Again, these are cost estimates associated with the bridge crossing directly. What this does open up is the opportunities for people to park at Waller Park. The actual trail connectivity from a distance perspective, when you park here at Waller Park or frankly here at City Hall or even at Groveway or Grimes, provides a couple of different alternatives than just that singular Oxbow linear park parking lot. And so we do have some alternatives that exist already. Nothing, I think, in the description would prevent us from looking at expanding of that parking space or the Oxbow linear trail itself as part of the scope. I don't think we're limited in that way, I guess is the way I would answer that question.
Councilmember Mortland.
Just to be sure, the beginning of this Oxbow Trail would be behind Waller Park, correct? That is the beginning of this trail, or where would it actually be?
Well, technically, the trail system is already in existence in most locations. The issue that we have right now is essentially the bridge crossings. That's what's not in existence. So you can, right now, if you were to park at Waller Park at our community center, you can access an existing trail system all the way down to Oxbow. You can cross the river at Oxbow and enter into the National Recreation Area. Similarly, you can do that from Upper and Lower Groveway community parks in the same manner. What is limiting in this factor is that if you were to currently take that path of travel and cross into the National Recreation Area and then make your way through the trail system down to the covered bridge, as soon as you're at the covered bridge, you essentially can go up to the waterfall, but you have to turn around and go back the same way that you came. These two bridges would connect the upper portion of the waterfall trail back to Oxbow. Again, creating a circular navigation opportunity as opposed to a one-way in, one-way out.
Can you touch on the current mode of transportation that people use, walking currently to get across the water?
Yeah, currently, if people choose to, and it's not recommended by your Parks Department director, is that you make your way across the sewer pipes that are there.
That's the reason that these bridges are a big deal.
Thanks, Will, for edifying that. Then you too, Jeff. Councilmember Hills, any thoughts or questions? So, Jeff, can I just, so for the clarity, so everyone can kind of know the amount of detail that's gone into the background on this. On the first four projects, Riverside Park, Roswell River Landing, Azalea Park, and Don White Memorial Park, those are the four projects remaining after phase 1 and phase 2 to complete the Roswell River Master Plan in its current edification. Is that true? Is that correct?
That is correct. I continue to qualify as a reminder that as part of our deliberations over the last 6 months, we have, I would say, pulled or paused, if you will, the multi-use building that's part of our current master plan and that was approved in 2016 conceptually, and that is not included as part of either our current funding for fiscal year 23 or within these bond projects.
So this 24/7 though will complete the Roswell River Master Plan with the exception of that one building next to phase 2.
Phase 3.
Phase
next,
3.
Yeah, next
Right.
to phase 2, you're correct.
Next to phase 2, which would have been phase 3 on the East Sand part of the
Yes,
River
sir.
Master Plan.
Yes,
So
sir.
that's the only part, if you look at the Roswell River Master Plan in conception, the only thing that wouldn't be there is that specific building. Is that
That's correct.
Okay. And then, and David, I want you to weigh in on this as well. So you've got 11 projects identified under park improvements, and then the 12th one is miscellaneous park improvements and land acquisition. On the first 11, so let me ask you a couple of questions. Different, same vein, but different outcomes.
Okay.
So let's say that we do the miraculous for our government, and that we spend $19,200,000 on the Roswell River Park rather than $20 million that we've identified. So we come $800,000 short. And let's say that, for example, in 7 branches, we spend $2,400,000 rather than $2.5. And let's say, on and on, that we save, instead of $62,900,000, we spend $61,200,000. $250,000. So we didn't spend $1.5 million. And Ryan, please weigh in on this. Do we have the ability of not spending that money and having it not show up on the bond, technically? Or is there a way that can benefit the taxpayer if by chance we actually come under our projected spending?
Yes, I believe the council has a couple of options. If we spend less than we end up issuing in bonds, the council could save that money and use it to pay down the debt associated with the bond, or you could reallocate it to other projects that would fall within the broader category of Parks and Rec and Bike Ped Master Plan.
Which takes me to the second question, which is usually what happens in government, is that more money gets spent, right? Or people want more money than they're requiring. And this is a big ask for our residents. So, for example, I believe that one of the things is we're identifying 11 projects with specificity, saying these are the 11 projects. So will these 11 projects, Jeff, happen simultaneously, or is there a timeline for these 11 projects?
So our intent in working with, of course, Ryan and our bond counsel is that we would phase these projects in appropriately within the financing limitations that are required. It's not realistic and frankly possible for us to do all of these projects within a tight 3-year time frame. We would be looking to the advice of Ryan and the team on building the projects in so that we meet the expectations of how the bond proceeds are sold, and then because we have to hit that 85% completion.
5% in the first 3 years.
In the first 3 years. And so the strategy would be, how do we implement all of these projects over the course of, a 3 to 4 to 5 year time frame at the advice and direction of this council, and phasing them in appropriately at that time.
So obviously, if I'm a resident and I vote for this and I want to see this happen, because I think a lot of people want to see this happen, they're going to want to know when does the dirt start moving? When does the park start getting improved? So
Right.
what can we tell them? When does that start happening?
So I think a couple of things. This mayor and council in fiscal year 23 has approved the design, conceptual designs down along the river. The priority has been the River Parks Master Plan with this mayor and council. And we have a $500,000 budget approval for the design of Don White, Azalea, and Riverside. Those are conceptual designs, so essentially gets us up to the point of then going into construction documents to be able to turn those projects on quickly. You'll actually start to see those come forward to mayor and council for contract approval here in August. And so from my perspective, that gets us a jump start from a design work that will need to be done for the river parks in particular. We're also on our way through the sand process and getting that contract work done alongside of our maintenance dredging operations. So the river park would be our first priority because the mayor and council has authorized some of the contract work and design work to be done in advance of even this bond question being considered or approved. We also have some on-call contracts that will be coming to consideration here at committee in August that will allow us then, through a task order basis, start to initiate design work on different park improvements, primarily East Roswell Park. That is an element that is already funded in this fiscal year budget that will give us a jump start on that project, and we'll know exactly kind of where we need to head next, assuming that the bond is approved for the other $8 million worth of investment at that property. So from just a quick answer, where we're headed right now, I would say by this fiscal year, council has already set us in the direction of design and work on the river as well as the East Roswell, and then we would tuck the other projects in right behind that to your policy direction.
So one of the questions I think that people are going to ask us, so let me go step back into, let's go back to the River Master Plan. On the phase 4s, the 4 phases of the Riverside Park, the Roswell River Landing, the Azalea Park, and the Don White Memorial Park, including phase 1 and phase 2 that we've got budget in FY23,
Okay.
normal budget. The question I think our residents are going to ask is, so when will my Roswell River Master Plan be done? When will it be done?
Done from a bond perspective, I think within the first 3 years of this bond, the River Park Master Plan being our priority, can be finished.
So you're saying that there's a high potential that if the voters taxpayers vote on this in November and pass ballot question 1, that the Roswell River Master Plan, including these 4 pieces of it, could be done in
In
3 years?
the first 3 years. Yeah,
Wow.
I think it's gonna take us about, the design elements take us roughly
Wow.
8 to 12 months of design work, which we're already starting on, and then another 24 months of construction behind that. So I think it's reasonable to say within 3 years, those can be finished.
That's amazing. So, I'll stop my line of questioning, my interrogation of Mr. Leatherman. It's so fun. I can't help it, but I know Councilmember Morthley wants to jump in. Yes, sir.
Can you touch on a couple of easy things that are quick fixes on this, such as turfing of athletic fields? What's your timeline for maybe the first field, or are we doing all the fields? Can you kind of give
Sure.
some feedback on that?
So the strategy kind of comes in 2 parts. Part of it is the financing and bond strategy for how much money will be available to the benefit of the city. And I'll be honest, that's way outside of my expertise and kind of that side of the strategy. As I look at our park projects, where I think we get the most utility out of contracting is, I think to Councilmember Morthland's point, when we go and spec out our synthetic turf, we've got two considerations, if you will, is we have to recognize that the useful life of those turf fields are roughly 10 to 12 years. And we want to be careful that we're not replacing all of those turf fields at the same time frame, because in 10 to 12 years, there is a likelihood that they will all they will come up for a maintenance project at the same time. And so phasing those turf projects in from a replacement side over time would be my recommendation. So you would do one to 2 of them every year of the bond project years throughout the course of that spend and execution of the bond project, so that as you think about 10 years down the road, we're setting ourselves up for a similar type of replacement investment. And I think it's wise just to consider that separate from the synthetic turf fields. You get much greater utility in doing a significant amount of improvements in a park and facility all at once, because you have contractors mobilized. If you're doing concrete work, you're doing that concrete work all at the same time, underground electrical, utilities, so on and so forth. And so my recommendation would be that we start to peel off large park units each year as we go forward. If we focus on the river initially and then tuck in some of our larger projects behind that. I think the additional challenge is then building enough capacity that we can still provide services to our residents all at the same time. And that's the other piece that we're juggling. In some bond projects, you'll build a brand new park. So it's not already in the inventory, it's not already being used. And so it becomes an added value as soon as you open it. In this case, we're tackling maintenance that has been deferred in our facilities or is required in our facilities. And so we're using the vast majority of these amenities as we are right now within our programming. And so finding the right balance of disruption, meaning shutting fields or facilities or restroom buildings or sidewalks down while still allowing people to enjoy and use those facilities will also be part of the challenge and associated with this. So it's a long answer of, peeling off the larger facilities. Hembry Park, East Roswell Park is a great example. Obviously, Roswell Area Park, planning all of the improvements associated with those. But if you took all 3 of those parks offline in 1 year, we'd have a significant challenge, just whether it be hosting summer camps or hosting all of our athletic activities. And so we would phase those projects in over the course of time in conjunction with how money is available and the design work necessary.
Do you have a follow-up to that, Will? Councilmember Hall.
Just to follow up, so a reasonable expectation of spending 85% in 3 years. What's the timeline for the other 15%?
I don't believe there is one, not that I know of.
So the parks roughly would have 10 million to spend. 85%, that's about 15% is 10 million, a little over 9 million. So I guess that's how you could allocate all that to your fields and really spread your fields out over a long course of time.
Yeah, I think the advantage in some cases, in places where we don't need to do a lot, as I think about it, I was going to say in some places where we don't need to do underground or utility work, but the reality is that's almost every place in our park facility where we're going to have to go in and really start from from, I'll say, the guts of the fields and facilities and work our way back up. And that goes with our drainage, with our water, utility infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and otherwise.
So, Jeff, what should be the expectation of someone voting yes on ballot question 1 for recreation parks, bicycle and pedestrian paths and sidewalks? What should there be expectation for you as the director of the Recreation and Parks and Historical and Cultural Affairs Department? What should a resident expect the parks to look like as a consequence if they vote aye or yes on this ballot question?
It's a great question. I think what they can expect from us as a department within those parks and facilities is, as you enter into the park and facility, that it feels like new. And that's really what we've really driven at in our recommendations, is that we're enhancing kind of the core of the parks and facilities and the athletic and playing fields and facilities. We've been doing it very incrementally over time through small investments, and this allows us to fast track that same philosophy. So in areas where we normally would have fixed, I would say, call it 1 or 2 sidewalks around our ball field because the concrete has been cracked and is just tired and worn out and beyond its useful life. Within these facilities, we'll be able to replace all of that concrete. We'll be able to replace all of the lighting infrastructure for the ball fields and transition them into LED lights. We'll be able to redo the irrigation systems. We'll be able to either replace or rehab the restroom facilities so that they feel like new in the vast majority of our parks and facilities.
So, Jeff, will East Roswell Park, Seven Branches Park, Groveway Community Park, Woodstock Soccer Complex, Hembry Park, Roswell Area Park, the Oxbow Trail, Grimes Bridge Park, Waller Park, and Big Creek Park, and Smith Plantation Trails, will those all look dramatically different if I vote yes to this ballot question 1?
I believe they will, yes.
And will they all look radically improved within a time period of 5 years?
I believe
This will be completed, basically?
Yeah, I believe yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you address the $20 million on the bike and pedestrian plan? Do you want to address that, or you want?
Probably not best positioned to address that.
But Mr. Skowski to?
Wait,
Yes, sir.
more park questions?
Oh, keep going. Sorry, Peter. I didn't mean to stop. I was just
All right.
skipping around. My bad.
Sitting over here by myself. I'd really like to get back into the minutia of a couple of these. You got 20 million on the central Roswell Park, and one thing that stands out is the pool. Mm-hmm. And I know from owning a pool that after several years they can become quite expensive to maintain. What is the utilization of the pool currently? How badly broken down are we, and how big of a piece of that 20 million is the pool?
So the way that we've carved out the budget in Roswell Area Park in particular is $5 million to replace the current pool as it currently sits, including the pool equipment, decking, and infrastructure, essentially a full replacement of the pool at its current location. There may be some options, depending on how we get into the budget and the costs associated with that, to modify the design or add some elements to that. We just don't have that information right now. Essentially took the current size and scope of the pool and then priced it out based on current market trends. So as you look at that number, assume 5 million of it is directed at the pool and at the facility. And I apologize, I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but I can absolutely track that down as far as occupancy. I will tell you that all of our parks or all of our summer camps utilize the pool throughout the week for the 12 weeks that we host summer camp. We have swim lessons that are there 8 weeks out of the summer. And have a lot of occupancy within that space during that time frame. We are still hiring lifeguards, so quick plug, if anybody's looking to hire and be a lifeguard even for the next month, we're looking for you, and please call our office. So beyond that, then we start to get into the infrastructure of the park itself. We also have so as you look at this description, LED lights within our ball fields, the replacement of 3 synthetic fields. I may have a little bit more detail here than what's on your screen. Restroom replacements. We have a number of picnic shelters, about 6 in that park facility. What we want people to feel when they come into that Roswell Area Park is the same community park with a very, very fresh and new look to it. So that, I think everybody kind of experiences parks when they just get a little bit tired. You know, the wood can only be repainted so many times before it looks tired and it needs to be replaced. And so the additional $15 million starts to tackle that in that park itself moving forward. I think the park infrastructure of repairing the trail, we have some drainage infrastructure that needs to be done. We also have been experiencing some problems with the drainage around the pond that we've recently experienced, and this line item has an allocation fixing some of those drainage infrastructures as well.
Can I make a point? So I think this is for us, what going through months of identifying projects and saying, all right, how do we get to the numbers we're going to get to, right? It's very important. And one of the questions I was going to follow up with on earlier was, there may be some cases, for example, let's say that Henry Park ends up being $12 million. Well, we only have $62,900,000 underneath park improvements. So that additional $1.8 million is going to have to come from another project. It's going to have to come from one of those 11 other park projects, or number 12, park land acquisition and park improvements and miscellaneous park improvements and land acquisition. The point being is that what we've tried to go through here is bring as much specificity to each project, park improvement. That was part of the request, saying, what do we really need this money for? I would not be surprised, like in the scope of any project, right, that some projects may even come under budget and some projects may come over budget. But one of the challenges of being so specific in every project is that there's something that may get pulled back because the money may not be there. Or there may be a decision from a political perspective that the elected political representatives say, you know what, I see that I got 10-2 at Henry Park, but I think it's a bigger priority that I spend another $2 million on Woodstock Soccer Complex. So the money shifts, because you have the legal purview underneath the ballot question to do this. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, David. So what we're trying to do is to inform our fellow residents with as much specificity. What I also want to say is that there is purview there, is that we believe that this money is needed for our city. This investment is needed for our city. But at this juncture on July 25th of 2022, that there may come on July 25th, 2023, Peter may say to Will and Christine and Lee, you know what, I would see a priority. I'd like to take $2 million from this project and I'd like to move it to that project. So I think some of the questions will remain to be seen. The question is, yes, we believe as an elected body that the city needs to invest $24 million in the Roswell River Master Plan. Yes, we believe as an elected body that the city needs to invest $62,900,000 on park improvements. And yes, we believe as an elected body that the city needs to invest an additional $20 million. And therefore, we believe this is a wise expenditure of our fellow residents. But I just want to say that sometimes we could get in a little bit of a foothold in saying, we are asking for $62,900,000 of park improvements. We are suggesting to you with great clarity where we believe that money is going to be spent. But I do want to say that that could change based upon priorities inside the park improvements, or it can change based upon budget allocations, i.e. one budget goes over budget, therefore you don't have the money to spend on another park. So I just want to give that clarity, because I think that's important, and this conversation will happen, my guess, time after time after time. So I want to give some, if you'll forgive me, leeway along the general path of this discussion. So yes, we asked Jeff and his team, and yes, we asked Ryan and his team, and yes, we asked Mr. Knight and his team long ago, starting back in January, tell us where we need to invest dollars. And so for months, this has been, as you know, including our 2 workshops, we've been working on this. But I just want to leave the pathway open, is that, you know what, Peter may say a year from now, I don't want so-and-so, and I'd like to move those dollars from this project to this project. So I just want to let you guys know that you do have that purview to do that, and we are asking the residents, obviously, for the permission to do that. So, sorry that I went on so long, but to me, it's a much-needed discussion. Yes, sir, Dr. Vanstrom.
With that in mind, I want to go to one more minutia and then one general comment. If we go back to East Roswell Park, and this is just because it's been asked of me, that the skate park, What's the reason for a skate park? Is there a need for a skate park? Have people been asking for that a lot?
Yeah, so yes, there is a need. It has been asked. It's been part of our conversation. This mayor and council were intending to bring the recommendations of the 5-year park master plan in August. And skate park actually is in the top 5 of our outreach and hearing back from our community. It's something that I've been in discussions with individuals and with our community off and on for the past couple of years since being your parks director. And I think to highlight the mayor's point, we've put the skate park from a budgeting and estimating perspective at East Roswell so that we have provisions for that. Now, we haven't made a policy decision, we haven't made a master plan decision that that's where it's going to be, but we wanted to make sure that we are allocating and accounting for it. We have obviously some general ideas of where it could fit at East Roswell, or we wouldn't have put it there on the line item. But that same comment could have been in a couple of different locations throughout our community. I think for us, it was important that we had the provisions to deliver that improvement. But there may be a future decision and deliberations with this mayor and council that causes that to go into a different location. And then to the mayor's point, we would then be shifting some of the resources that is currently a line item in East Roswell Park to a different location in order to satisfy that need.
Dr. Vestra?
Yeah, that's
Oh, it
right.
is the number one. Thanks.
So Councilmember Morthland and I, he's been just going through and helping provide comments associated with the master plan, and he just brought me the page, and it's actually the number one out of our feedback from the community that you'll see in August.
Oh, that's great. That's great. When was the last time we won a gold standard award for parks?
Just before I arrived, 2017, 2018.
All right. Part of being a Roswell resident is pride in our parks. Part of living in Roswell is being extremely proud of our parks and utilizing our parks for all these different things that you've listed. In your estimate, what I'm hearing tonight, is that what's going to put us back up in the gold standard?
I believe it does. I think the investment in the river in both new park facilities as well as tackling the 2006 master plan and the $25 million investment. And the reality is it's closer to 30 when you add this current year fiscal contribution into those park projects. Really demonstrates the commitment of the mayor and council and the community into investing not only into our parks and facilities, but the river in particular. And then also recognizes that through the bond recommendations, we have to be responsible in taking care of what we have and building that ongoing park infrastructure that currently serves our community, while also providing new facilities. The skate park that we just got done having a conversation about, bridge and trail connectivity that continues to be one of the top requests of our community, and combining that with sidewalk and multi-use trail. I think all of those combined starts to turn that corner and bring us back into that gold standard as you described. And this is a tremendous investment into those facilities that I think we continue to hear back from our community that they appreciate and love so much.
Yeah, and I encourage the community to support this because it's going to be amazing.
Pretty cool, isn't it? Thanks, Dr. Vestra. Councilmember Hills?
Thank you. In the consideration for the gold, is it gold award? What's the name of it?
Yeah, the gold medal.
Gold medal. Are the bike trails and pedestrian improvements, are those considered in that? I know we've got that separated out here. We've got trails buried within, not buried, they're straight out in almost every single line item here, but the bike and ped, is that a consideration in that?
It is. There are elements of that review that lean more towards connectivity within our bike and ped master plan that also are part of the standards associated with the evaluation and gold medal. And you have kind of two different pieces. You have our accreditation standards, which are even independent of our gold medal award that we also do every 5 years. And we're currently in that accreditation process right now to accredit ourselves as an agency meeting roughly about 150 standards in our industry. And the bike ped master plan and the connectivity values that it represents is a big component of that. And you know, as you read the philosophy around the bike ped master plan, it's connecting our parks and our schools and our commercial areas together with our neighborhoods, providing safe walking paths to schools, safe opportunities to get into parks and facilities as alternatives, but also as exercise opportunities. And so yes is a long answer to all of those pieces, but I think it's also why you see, and voters may ask themselves the question of, well, why do you see trail projects within this list? And what we've done is a very kind of purposeful and intentional effort as a department in working with our transportation department, that our department handles trails that are not within the right of way. So as you see Seven Branches improvement, that is a multi-use trail envisioned to go through the Seven Branches Park project, outside of the right of way as a multi-use trail project. And so it fits better within our wheelhouse, similar to our Big Creek Parkway trail system, as well as the River Park system. So those are two kind of real life examples of why we do it in that way. And then our transportation department is much better at engineering, obviously, on the right of way. That is their wheelhouse and expertise.
Yes, sir.
Can I just say one more thing? That was so humble, by the way, of you to say that the last award was before you came on. And I don't want there to be any misconception that you haven't been working hard with the budgets that you've been given to work with. It's the infrastructure that's fallen apart, and we cannot keep up with it with the funding that we give you year to year. We need to go beyond that. And I just wanted to, I picked up on that. I don't want the public thinking that you haven't done your job. You've done your job with your budget. This is going to really take us a much, much further than ever imagined.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Peter. That's a great point. Dan, do you have time, sir, to join us? Talk a minute about the, Jeff, don't leave us. Stay with us.
I won't. I'll just move over.
Okay. A minute, you're bringing Mr. Cox with you as well? So this is, you bring him?
Always need backup, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, we're glad to have you. Dan Skowski, Dave Cox, thank you from the Transportation Department. Would you like to talk a little bit about the bike and pedestrian master plan and the $20 million that's being proposed potentially on ballot question 1 for this?
Sure, just a couple of points there. So we have a lot of sidewalk gaps in the city. We have a strong bike ped master plan that Jeff's already talked about, and this would go a long way towards continuing that investment. So we've taken a good hard look at our existing sidewalk gaps, and this would contribute a significant chunk. We would anticipate roughly 25% to a third of this funding going to fill sidewalk gaps. It's a long list, but this would put a dent in it. I think we've got about 30 roughly on the list, and this would probably take care of about a third of that, a little more. On the multi-use trails, we've got a significant amount of both sidewalk and multi-use trail work in our T-SPLOS 2 program, and that's made a significant dent in the Tier 1 program. Probably cut that list by almost half. 26 projects were in the initial Tier 1 list, and this will eliminate about 12 of them with prior funding. And this additional funding could probably add 2 other significant corridors out of maybe a candidate of 4 or 5 really significant additions to our hub and spoke network. So we think this would go a long way towards really showing a major difference in the city of Roswell in the span of the next 3 years. Now, the one thing I would want to say, we talked a little bit about schedule, and I appreciate Jeff teeing that up, because he owns, or we own, the city, the parks, and right-of-way generally is not a huge issue, but utilities often are on these small projects, and timing may be a little bit slower on some of those, but we would take steps to move with preliminary work that we can get started on now, should this move forward.
It's a great distinction, Dan, on the timing difference and the ability of some of the external limiting factors that do impact the projects and the timing of those projects. Council, yes, Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Dan. As far as the sidewalk gaps go, is that focusing more on commercial areas, residential areas? Are they priority on usage? Can you give a little bit, I know that we have flexibility within there, but can you give us some idea of what,
We do.
how that's prioritized?
There's an extensive list, and there is actually sort of a mayor and council reviewed scoring system that we use, and Dave is much more familiar with that, but it does consider both access to parks, schools, commercial areas. It's all about promoting connectivity. And if there are more specifics, I think Dave can speak to the hard questions. Does that address it?
That helps, that's good.
Council? Councilmember Hall.
I had the advantage of, Dave, thank you for preparing the map of the bike ped master plan, the short-term, midterm, and long-term projects. And if, looking at that map, this will, I mean, having everything that we've done through T-Splost and just being able to finish some of these major corridors along with the gaps, it's gonna be like night and day for this city as far as connectivity. I mean, I don't know if we can post that for the public on the website somewhere about what you had shared.
We certainly can. We didn't want to take up your time this evening with a lot of graphics, but we have those prepared and can make those available.
And I shared them with Ryan if he wanted to put them up there right now, but
Yeah,
I know
that's,
we have other
I think
things.
you could address that a little bit, because I think people need to, I think our residents need to say, if they vote on yes on ballot question 1, what does this $20 million towards the bike and pedestrian plan really mean to them? And what does it look like in 4 years' time? But I think, to your point, it's
I'd
significant.
like to see the map. It takes
Please.
about 2 minutes to
Yes.
flip through the slides, and I would say go quickly because I've already told you a bit, and just skip to the map impact. So this is the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 breakdown. You could just go ahead, Dave.
So did you want to go ahead?
No, you go ahead from here.
So this is the short-term plan projects that I showed Councilmember Hall. This was what we had when we adopted the plan 3 years ago. I'm going to flip to the next slide in a moment, but you'll see on the next slide what projects have been completed and what projects have been committed to by T-Splost or other sidewalk funds. So on the next slide here, you'll see a bunch of these disappear. That's all that would be left in Tier 1, as Dan alluded to, if all the projects we have committed funding for once they're completed. So you can see we took a huge chunk out of that with T-Splost too. That was the driving factor, was to do a lot of bike ped stuff. So you can see we removed a lot of things with some of our projects like Riverside, the Big Creek Parkway is obviously on there, a lot of the multi-use trails on Holcomb Bridge and Old Alabama, you can see they disappear. And also we have a couple sidewalk gaps up on Hardscrabble.
Look at that,
and
just,
Warner Roads.
should you just point out to everybody, so, and these projects are distributed on both sides, both the west side and the east side, so literally almost evenly.
Yeah, when you look at what we have committed to date, you can see a lot of them are kind of in the central and eastern side of the city. So, and then moving on quickly to the midterm, here's what's on the second tier of the bike ped plan, and then we also have the long-term projects. And then the other thing that we talked about was focusing on the hub and spoke system. So if you wanted to look exclusively at multi-use trails on the hub and spoke, this is our hub and spoke network that was developed as part of the bike ped plan. I hope you can see the orange dotted lines there around the city. They link to approximately 5 different hubs of activity centers of the city. Here's what we have out there today. These are multi-use trails, at least 8 feet wide, sidewalks. So that's what we have out there today. This is what's committed through existing funding or T-Splost 2 funding. And I just want to point out Pine Grove Road, the multi-use trail goes to Lake Charles. When we do the scope for that project, it may go further west towards Cobb County. That's yet to be determined. But you can see we're filling in quite a bit of the network. And then with the bond money, there's, as Dan alluded to a few moments ago, there's potential candidates. Before I put these up there, I want to stress these are not the final selection. A lot of it will depend on public input or guidance from the mayor and council and available funding. But these are possibly 4 new candidates for multi-use trails if we focus exclusively on this network. The one thing I do want to point out, with the Sidewalk Gap Matrix, has over 140 gaps on it. A lot of these gaps will be covered by some of these purple lines, and a lot of them also by the yellow. So this list, as Dan said, will decrease pretty significantly with these projects. And then we also have the other thing we wanted to talk about later is how much money will go to sidewalk gaps versus, multi-use trails and bike ped plan, that could be sorted out. So there's a lot of great benefit here.
Pretty incredible. Christine just leaned over to me and she said it's pretty incredible, and that's exactly right. It is pretty incredible. And timetable is basically 4 years from now, on July 25th, 2026, how much of this will be done?
Well, if we have to get all the money encumbered within 3 years of acquiring it, I believe that would be approximately 4 years from today, if the voters passed it.
It'd be 3 years from
We would try to accelerate as much as we could. We'd probably batch some of the projects together, whether they be sidewalks or multi-use trails, possibly even combine them into groups and have one firm do all of them. That might speed things up. But as Dan alluded to, utilities is the biggest challenge. You'd be surprised how small little obstacles can cause delays on projects with utilities. That would probably be the biggest challenge. But I suspect we could get a lot of these done within 3 to 3.5 years.
Well, I'm really glad you guys brought colored pictures for us, unlike Jeff, who just left it to our imaginations. But we know, honestly, Jeff knows that his project, this is transformational stuff that we're proposing to our fellow residents on the River Park Master Plan, on the $62,900,000 of park improvements, and the $20 million for the bike and pedestrian plan. Gentlemen, well done. Thank you for your months of preparation for our residents on this. Council, any further parting thoughts or questions? And so I think on ballot question 1, what your city council has submitted is that in November, the ballot question will be, we'd like to submit $107,600,000 general obligation bond for recreation, parks, bicycle and pedestrian paths, and sidewalks. And I hope that this first hour or 55 minutes has given you some insight to the thinking and from the leadership and the team here at Roswell about how that money would be allocated. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate that very much. And with that, we'll go to ballot question 2. Ballot question 2, public safety, police and fire. It has been submitted by this city council and mayor for a general obligation bond of $52 million. $29 million of that is allocated towards the fire, and $23 million of that is allocated towards police projects. In its current iteration, underneath fire, it's replacement of Fire Station 21 for $6,881,500, replacement of Fire Station 22 for $6,919,416, replacement of Fire Station 23 for $4,532,109, the relocation of Fire Station 27 for $5,365,125, construction of new Fire Station 28 for $5,365,125, for a grand total on the fire station projects of $29,063,275, and then $20 million allocated towards a new public safety facility headquarters to house police, fire, and 911 for a grand total of $52 million. So, I'll leave the floor open for council for any thoughts or questions. Councilmember Hills.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Maybe we could go ahead and have our chiefs come up, our deputy chief as well for police, just to get some questions answered or clarifications, if you would. Chief Menino, if you would, I know we've talked about this in several different work sessions and even our last council meeting. Can you give just a raw overview of what we're looking at as far as these renovations, in particular 21, 22, and 23. 27 and 28 are a little bit different animal, but to start, just the first 3, where your priorities are, and we can support you. I know I can on your why, but just to give our public, the viewers.
Yeah. Pictures. Yeah, we can pull up some pictures. Station 21 was built in 1948. I believe it's originally was a car dealership. It's been renovated since then. Station 22 and Station 23 were both built in the mid-1970s, and they were purpose-built as fire stations, but that was a time when the Roswell Fire Department was all volunteer. So those stations were not staffed 24 hours a day. They weren't intended to be. They have about 1,100, just north of 1,000 square foot of living space. The fire engines barely fit into the apparatus bay, today's modern fire engines when they're backed in. And there's just a lot of renovations that would be needed to bring them up to current standards. including additions, you would have to have more space. We've just outgrown them. So Station 21, 22, and 23 are fairly easy in my opinion, just due to their age. And 22 and 23, obviously, they just not even close to meeting our space requirements.
Good, thank you. And as far as 27, we were talking about a relocation on that one. This is the one that is all the way at the end of far east, I would say, right at the Gwinnett line. Yeah, near Girard Park, across the street from Girard Park. Oh, perfect.
Yes, ma'am. So on the left is our current situation, and those rings are ISO Insurance Services Office, is what rates a community on their ability to provide fire protection, and they use 1.5 mile road mile. So those rings are 1.5 miles around the fire station, and on the one on the left, you see current Fire Station 27 right now. So in between Station 27 and 24, you see the gap that is there. So a part of the gap analysis that we had done by CPSM recommends moving Fire Station 27. And this relocation is at Steeplechase and Holcomb Bridge Road. And if you like, I have some data that shows what the improved coverage would look like. Show that. Our wonderful GIS team helped with this.
And Chief, just devil's advocate, I know we have a great relationship with our sister cities around here. What would you tell a resident when you see how much of that coverage, that radius, or outside of the city of Roswell, where we might be able to help our neighbors? Do we have that in return? Can you speak to that and how moving that station would benefit our residents, and certainly not helping our neighbors, but...
Yeah, so obviously with Sandy Springs and Gwinnett, we have some ability to assist. We have an automatic gate agreement in place with Sandy Springs, but Sandy Springs is actually housed at Station 27 right now with their Engine 55 while they're rebuilding a station that's going to kind of serve their area next to Station 27. It's great to be good neighbors, and we absolutely are proponents of that, but primarily we exist to serve the citizens of Roswell. And we certainly have some gaps in that coverage right now. To kind of shed some light on those gaps. So looking at this left column here, this is just East Roswell and defining that as everything east of 400. So there's about 11 square miles. Right now, 5.6 square miles is within that 1.5 miles of a fire station, within that ISO ring. If we were to move Fire Station 27 to the proposed location, it goes from 5.6 to 9.32 square miles within that 1.5 miles. For addresses, just over 14,000 addresses in that area. Right now, 7,500 are within that 1.5 miles of a fire station. That would go up to 1,200. So additional 4,400 addresses, both residential and commercial, would be within that 1.5 miles. I'm going to skip all the way to the right under CAD calls. So these are our 911 calls for 2021 calendar year. 4,000 happened in that East Roswell area, east of 400. 2,500 of them were within 1.5 miles of one of those fire stations. If we moved it, it would go up to 3,500. So about 970 of those calls would have been within 1.5 miles of a fire station, should Fire Station 27 be moved. So from my professional opinion, though you didn't ask, I think it would be certainly an increase in service delivery to the citizens on the east side of Roswell.
Well, just to put it in layman's terms, on the east side currently, just look at the very first column. You have about 50% coverage based upon the gap analysis, right? Which is for a first-rate city like Roswell that puts public safety at such a high priority in terms of protecting its residents. 50% in terms of the gap analysis is not acceptable. It's an unacceptable figure. It's something we have to do something about. And it takes a capital investment, and therefore That's why Fire Station 27 is on the tape, forgive me, Fire Station 28, forgive me, the relocation of 27, I always call it the Gwinnett County Station. The Gwinnett County Station, right there at the Gwinnett County line, relocating that to the close to Horseshoe Bend intersection would dramatically change the coverage. Is what you're showing. You go from 50% of coverage on the east side of the city to 84%, basically in a quick swath by opening up and relocating this fire station.
And to your point, it's not even adding a fire station, it's just relocating an existing station.
The other thing I think, Joe, to your point, Chief, to your point is, if we were to take residents and we did a show and tell, and we showed them Fire Station 22, 23, 21, and we showed them current modern fire apparatus, one, the housing for those trucks, and literally how it's almost darn near impossible in a couple of those fire stations, but showed them the actual, what the inside of those stations look like. I think the overwhelming majority of residents would go, you got to do something about that. You cannot have my firemen and women staying in these facilities. You would say, we got to do something about this. There you go. And you would say, this is where my firemen and women work. I don't want them to work in those facilities, knowing that they're safeguarding my family.
Correct, they really weren't designed to be staffed 24 hours a day, and we've certainly outgrown them, even with, you can see how the fire engine fits into the apparatus bay, and then also even our bunk rooms, they're kind of separated just by some freestanding wooden walls, but this is certainly not the standard for a modern day fire station. No room for a dishwasher, no real room for storage. Put some freestanding cabinetry in there. We may do, but we've outgrown it.
The great news about this particular piece of property, this is Fire Station 22, is that the property is sufficient enough that we can build on that same piece of property. That's a great advantage, correct?
Station 23, off
23,
Jones Road.
forgive me.
Yes, sir.
23.
This is the one.
740 Jones Road. And that's a huge advantage from a cost standpoint because we don't have to acquire new land. We can use that existing land.
Correct.
That, however, is not the case at Fire Station 22, where a new modern fire facility, a new modern fire station simply won't fit on the existing footprint of land. So we are going to have to acquire new land for that
Correct.
piece.
Which was built into the cost estimate.
Absolutely. Council?
Does the new one come with tennis courts?
We actually budgeted about $300,000, don't know if that's accurate or not, to redo those tennis courts. The thought would be we would take that entire parcel, the frontage on Jones Road, and then perhaps push the tennis courts further south. So we did put $300,000 in there for the replacement of the tennis courts. No idea if it's enough, but it'll at least supplement Jeff's budget.
Well, they actually are used by residents regularly, routinely. It is part of our, Jeff, I don't know. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's part of our park system, is it not? Yes, it is. Yeah, part of our park system. It's a legitimate piece that our residents do use and enjoy. So it sounds like it's like a little thing that the firemen get to use and they go out there and play tennis. In reality, our residents are using those, and they're using them as part of our park system.
These are the open courts.
Yes,
Come and
open
drop in
courts.
and play.
Come in.
No reservations needed.
Exactly, no reservations. Any other thoughts or questions in relation to the fire projects? How about on the new public safety facility? We talked about this a lot, and Lynn, you want to address this at all? Because this is a big deal. This is a gigantic deal for our city.
Yes, it absolutely is. So as far as, in the public safety complex, we're talking about having a fire headquarters, a police headquarters, 911 center, an emergency operations center all together in one location, which is fantastic because we all collaborate with each other. We all work together on public safety, emergency management. and having emergency operations center that we are all cohesively a part of. To speak specifically in regards to the police department building, so I didn't bring any pictures, I'm sorry. But in regards to the police department, so it was built in the early 90s, and we have definitely outgrown that building. And we're recently approved for a new lieutenant's position, and we are going to be contacting building ops soon to convert our last closet into an office. We have gone around and converted just about every closet in that building into an office at this point in time. So we're about out of closets now. We have been utilizing a lot of the space over in the old jail. We have offices, so we have supervisors and sergeants who work in jail cells. Those are their offices, but we made them look nice for them. Our CSI lab is also a pod in the old jail. Our quartermaster area is the old booking area, so the individual cells. In one cell you have uniforms, and in another cell you have duty belts. The detox tank, when you bring in the very intoxicated subject who needs to come down off their intoxication, is now our armory. So our armory is there. So we are very, very creative with the space that we have, and we're out. We are definitely out of space. We have 210 vehicles in our fleet, but I have 85 parking spaces. So we are also completely out of parking as well. And as you know, these are vehicles with very, very sensitive equipment, and they need to be in a secured lot in a secured facility. We have some shared vehicles as part of North Fulton SWAT that we are entitled to keep stored on our property, but we have nowhere to put them and no covered storage for them. So they're being stored off-site at other cities because we don't have a place to put them. So we have outgrown, and we definitely need a larger space. And it's a fantastic opportunity for us to bring each of these emergency services together into the one complex.
And do a new 911 center, which continues, which has been proposed on the in the budget for year after year after year, because it's way overdue. If
Yes.
anybody's been to our 911 center, they understand the current restrictions. They also understand the high sensitivity that particular command center poses to the city, how important it is, how strategically important it is, and that it is way overdue having a 911 center, which is a significant amount of money in itself. And so, and by the way, your police center was built, like you said, in the early 90s for a police force for literally 20% of the size of the current police force.
Correct.
So it is housing a dramatically different size police force to take care of a city of 100,000 people with the best police force in the state of Georgia easily, and the best paid police force here in the region.
Thank you.
And so part with that is to keep using the proper resources of supporting our police officers and our firemen and women so that we continue to take care of you so you can take care of us. This is a big deal. And that's why it's ballot question number 2, $52 million for police and fire. And we obviously are open to all questions for our residents and hopefully to answer them. But you can see a significant amount of this is meant for fire stations, and a significant amount meant for a new public safety center for the police, fire, and 911, all to be housed together. And if we showed you pictures of where Joe worked, you would not believe it. If we showed you where Joe worked and his leadership team, you would be surprised. Way overdue of giving him and his command leadership team a place that is duly fitting a leadership team in the fire department. So any other thoughts or questions from council? Councilmember Hills.
Just one more thing, for either Deputy Chief or Chief Panino. Can you give for our residents just a couple of examples, it doesn't have to be a lot, of how the police and fire headquarters will benefit our residents? Like, what kind of things are you doing? I know that seems really mundane, but for our residents, it's a big deal. I don't think there's any opposition to what we want to do. I think people will be elated. But if you could give just a couple of examples of how being together, I mean, our fire headquarters is not even in the city of Roswell. It's in Alpharetta. But so I may have stole your answer, but could y'all give a little bit of just a couple brief examples, please?
Yeah, so we, like the Deputy Chief said, we collaborate quite a bit on everything we do. So if there's a Live in Roswell, we're getting together, we're looking at incident action plans, and we're looking at unified command, how we're gonna run an incident like that. And it's hard to do when we are so separated. We either have to Zoom or drive to one another's location, and it's not just one person, it's our staff. We get together and kind of pregame these types of things. Also, 911, which right now is with the police department, serves the fire department as well. So it's really easy for the police department to walk down the hall, talk to a 911 supervisor, ask them to replay the last call, get to the bottom if there was an issue. For us, we're on the other side of town. So it's either a phone call, a Zoom, a drive, whatever it is. And that geographical difference, it does make a difference in the amount that we can collaborate together. There's just an impediment to it when you have to drive or pick up the phone or whatever it is. Also, from an emergency operations, from emergency management perspective, our EOC right now is on the first floor of this building. It is 25% of the size of this room, and we had an activation there for
We had it for the ice storms, for.
yeah, we had a winter storm, not of any great magnitude, but if we had a full activation to get department directors and all the staff in there to do a full activation, it would be impossible. There's not good cell service, our radios can't transmit out. And again, we are coming from different locations to one EOC. 911's coming across the street, police is coming across the street, we're driving from the other side of town. And that EOC would also be housed in that public safety building. So when we need to do an activation, we're together already. We just go in and kind of get the room set up and manage whatever event might come to the city.
Also, from a service to the citizen standpoint, citizens come to us to get copies of reports, records, permits, things like that. As of right now, I see it happen every day. We do have signs everywhere, but I see it every day. People walk to one door and it's not the right door for what they need. They have to go down to the other door because we're out of space. We've had to divide our staff into two separate locations. So our records staff is working in essentially two separate buildings that happen to share a wall. So you think you know where you're going to go to get records. And again, we do have some signs, but when you have a lot of signs, you kind of get sign blindness. And I see people wind up going between the two doors every day. Our evidence technicians, so if you lost your purse somewhere, somebody turned it in, we locate you and say, hey, we have your purse, come and get it. When you come, records is going to contact evidence. Evidence is in a whole nother building on the other side of our area that has also been kind of Frankenstein put together. They're going to get all that stuff out, and then rather being able to bring you to a secured location to go over your contents, they're going to have to come get back out there to the lobby and meet you out there. So if we have a better design to receive our citizens in for their reports, for their records, for their permitting, to offer them more privacy when they're coming in for it, rather than what we have now where we're just kind of sticking people wherever we can.
I think, Deputy Chief, that is a great point and well illustrated, is that part of this is, I think it's a real easy thing. Well, we're just trying to make things shiny and new. It's always nice to have shiny new things. But the real purpose is to deliver better service, is to be more efficient, it is actually to be a better steward of the residents' dollars that we receive and the expenditure of those dollars, that we create a better value of those services. And sometimes the facilities and how you're housed makes a big difference. I.e., if this were a business, probably would have already been radically done because the inefficiencies would have been drawn out and said, it's costing this business too much money the way we're set up. We've got to address that. And sometimes governments can be slower to do that because you have to ask the taxpayers for the money. And so this is long overdue, and appreciate y'all's hard work in putting all this together. So thank you. Any other thoughts or comments or questions from council? So with that being said, this council in this workshop appreciates both chiefs of being with us, and obviously in reference to ballot question 2 on the public safety, police, and fire, $52 million general obligation bond that we'll submit on the ballot this November, and then on August 22nd there'll be a further elucidation of these expenditures, but this workshop is to address those. Thank you all so very much. Appreciate you. And the third question here tonight is ballot question number 3 on the 22 bond referendum. Ballot question 3, the question of a public parking deck for $20 million vaguely, there's the court in the area of the downtown corridor, as identified in terms of geographic region. Council, any thoughts or questions on ballot question 3? Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. And I wanted to recognize Daryl, our Economic Development Director, for obtaining this information. I asked him to maybe scope out some recent projects that maybe people could take a look at and see what they were, and I believe Winter Construction provided this information. There's a parking deck at Halcyon that recently was built, and that was $18 million. And these are construction costs. It doesn't include land.
Do you want Daryl up here?
Oh, yeah, maybe Daryl, would you?
No, don't want to get you off. I just figured you probably.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Who's this guy? Councilmember Hall, I didn't mean to cut you.
No.
Feel free
This
to
is,
introduce this gentleman.
this is Daryl Conley, our Economic Development Director, and who was so kind to obtain this information about Snellville, Atlanta, and Halcyon, just as a kind of a point of reference, if you can expound on that, please.
Sure. So the information that I was able to get from Winter Construction is that the project up at Halcyon cost about $15,000 to $18,000 per space. It was a 1,000-space garage, has efficient, easy logistics, simple skin. There's a parking structure that costs about $18,000 to $20,000 per space in Snellville. There was a parking structure that they produced, which was $20,000 to $25,000 per space. I'm not sure of the location there, but then there's another one that they recently built, which is about $30,000 per space at Grant Park. So that's the most complex one. It also has a park on top of it. So there's a pretty wide range. And long and short, they were saying that in Roswell, it would probably be between $20,000 to $25,000 per space if it's an efficient parking garage.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Hall. Thank you, Daryl. Council, thoughts or questions for Daryl or anyone? Yes, sir. Councilmember Vanstrom.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of address the central business district, or the downtown Canton area, and the concept of ample parking. That's a discussion that's going on a lot with everybody talking about the parking deck. I think it's more a question of where is the parking available and how easy is it to find the parking. I think that's more the problem that we're having. I think we share with our churches. There are times when churches have events and those parking spaces may not be as available as readily. There's times when we use private businesses. Many times those private businesses can adjust their fees and we don't have as much control on that. And then there's flex unavailability there too. And then there's just the constant frustration, I think, of our visitors and guests trying to find those parking spaces. And I think this would centralize a lot of our parking. It would take our central business district upwards to being that #1 destination center that we would like it to be in North Fulton. So I think there's a lot of benefit to the parking deck. Not that we don't necessarily have spaces, it's we don't have designated, easy to find, easy to access, reliable spaces all over the place.
I want to buttress your point, Peter. I think that, there's been a couple of studies of note done on this issue, and everybody has an anecdotal perspective. But one perspective I would just like to offer is one of the things we outlined as a leadership team from the beginning is just look what we've done in the first 6 months. First one, we said we identified we're going to develop the end site in mind, 20 years out rather than 2 or 3 years out. So that's what the basis of our economic development plan. The second part of that is that we're going to identify 4 economic nodes of which are going to be the cornerstones of our economic development over the next 20 years. The third part about is activating a new development authority to help buttress activity on the east side. The fourth part of that was bringing in alignment through the P3 as part of the strategic economic team. The fifth part about that is hiring an economic development director to be the overarching economic development director for the city. The seventh part about that is creating an economic development liaison through the city council, i.e. through council member Dr. Vanstrom, on and on and on, to create strategic alignment on issues that we think are going to affect the long term of the city. And just a simple point that I wanted to make. What we do know is that 85% of the sales revenues in the downtown Canton Street area come outside the zip codes of 30075 and 30076. Well, logic would dictate that one, that's a good thing, right? That's a positive economic fact that you're bringing 85% of your sales tax revenue in from outside of your current residence. But it would also suggest what opportunities do you have, and what opportunities do you have. And we know that the first economic node of the 4 economic nodes is to expand the city center, to expand the downtown corridor, all the way basically from the river up Highway 9 to 92. So the downtown the parking downtown is strategically aligned with the ability to continue to develop what we want to, or what we consider in the long-term interest of our economic vitality. And when you've got something that works, keep finding ways for it to enhance it and to facilitate its long-term success. I think part of this is that we have to be very, very smart in the parking, quote-unquote, facility that we develop and create. A lot of people are saying, where is this going? And my response to this is not to be cute. It would not be wise to disclose where this is going, because it would dramatically enhance the value of the property before it was necessarily done. Obviously, this will have to be done strategically to be a good steward of the general obligation fund, bond funds, if it's so approved by the voters. But I think to your point, Peter, is that the parking is not just about convenience. It's about economic vitality. It's about long-term economic vitality, and it's about putting it as part of the economic node that we can continue to expand this economic mode is something that's already working. Council? Don't let me be the last word, please. Daryl, any comments or thoughts from your perspective on this?
I think it's a terrific idea, do the parking deck. I think it's going to help support the businesses that are down there and help with the economic development in the downtown area.
The last example that I think council has had a chance to see is the one in Grant Park, which is just, I think most people would see that and go, oh, I love that. You know, it's so subdued, it's so camouflaged, it's got a park on top of it. It is a little pricier than the ones you mentioned, like it's a little bit above our budget. And I think that's going to be cool, is can we create what we really, really need and want in this city, and perhaps deliver it at a price that will be satisfactory to our residents. Daryl, anything else, sir? Councilmember Worthling.
We had, based off what you were just saying, you know, we don't need to disclose any kind of address for a future location, but one of the ideas that we were batting around earlier was the ground level being below grade. Were you part of those discussions, or was that before your?
I've had some conversations about that.
Is that still a possibility to where we can keep it, you know, at rooftop level instead of something that you would see 4 and 5 stories high?
The further down you go,
The more
more
expensive.
costly it is.
So
I believe with the Grant Park, you know, you've got $30,000 per space, and that has some below ground, has a below ground level.
we have an option for below ground with this number. Is just we don't know exactly what that is right now.
So at 20,000, do the math here. I think at 25,000, we're talking about 800 spaces. 30,000, what are we talking about? 700 spaces, maybe 6.
And that's construction and not land acquisition if we have to acquire land, is that correct?
It does not include the cost of the land.
Thanks.
There are some sophisticated pieces that go into this. There's no question about it. And that's why we put $20 million into it, understanding that there may or may not be land acquisition. And so there are a lot of pieces of this. The first part was to get permission from our fellow residents in the support of a general obligation bond to begin to solve what we think is a real need for the city. Daryl, thank you, sir. Council, any other thoughts or questions on ballot question number 3, $20 million for a public parking deck, as identified basically in the downtown corridor. Thank you very much, Daryl, and I appreciate the council. Council, any thoughts or questions to kind of end our last session here together? This obviously is something that, you all have worked very, very hard on, and tremendously hard on. Ryan, thank you for your tremendous work. I know that the council is incredibly excited about proposing this to our fellow residents, that this is something that could be transformational for our city and part of an investment that will make a real difference to the quality of life and to our residents. Councilmember Hall.
I just wanted to make sure we cover next steps.
Follow away, please. Well, the next steps is, Ryan, do you want to address the next step? Yes, sir.
We have some time reserved at tomorrow's committee meeting if there's any further discussions that are needed at this point. That's all up to you all, of course, and with the ultimate goal of, I believe, settling on a final project listing by August 22nd.
That's right. On August 22nd, this council will vote on the as clearest iteration of projects, which really what this workshop is try to give clear iteration of how the money is proposed to be spent, understanding that it is still big swiping categories, but we feel like the more that we can give detail, the more that it serves people in understanding, okay, I'm with that, I love that. That's something I want. Because we believe that the vast majority of residents definitely want to invest in their parks, in the River Master Plan, in the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan, in our fire and police, and in a public parking place. So, yes, Councilmember Hall.
Can you give or provide an example of the detail that we are going to need on August 22nd as far as the projects? Just for example, this parking deck, what are we going to need by then?
The August 22nd timeline is really your all's discretion because the ballot questions themselves have been set. They've been approved. They're ready for the November 8th election. This is more of an internal deadline that you all set to try and set up, I think, the public education campaign to follow.
Yeah, let me address that, Ryan. Thanks, Councilmember Hall. So, the technical answer to your question, this is the true and technical answer. And that's why I'm very proud of the work that Ryan and his team has done and work that you guys have done. Here's the technical answer to the question you just asked.
It's done.
Ballot question 1, recreation parks, bicycle and pedestrian parks and sidewalks, $107,600,000. That's the technical answer. Now, we feel a responsibility, right, that we should be accountable and forthright and as clear as possible about the expenditure. Technical answer to ballot question 2. Public safety, police and fire, $52 million. Tell me if I'm wrong here, David. Ballot question 3, public parking deck, $20 million. That is the technical answer that could come out of August 22nd. What this workshop is, and what my request was of August 22nd was to create as much clarity about how we're proposing to submit that the taxpayers, the residents, spend their money, so that people could say, what are you doing with it? Where's it going? So that we could be as clear as possible. But the technical answer is ballot question 1. Recreation parks, bicycle and pedestrian paths and sidewalks, $107,600,000. Am I right about that? So is that helpful?
Thank you.
So we're trying to elucidate a lot more information. Yes. Well, you're going to get a lot of questions on the 3, and the challenge with question 3 is we're asking permission for $20 million. And 3 is very complex. I think most people know this. I think most people know that the parking deck, if approved, is a very complex instrument of if you're going to do it right. 1, where's it go? What's it look like? How camouflaged is it, right? Nobody wants a monstrosity in downtown. Like that much is clear. We all know. If we said, put it up there, monstrosity parking deck, kill it. No thank you, right? The question and the responsibility is, if the voters approve it, can we do a parking deck that's going to serve the needs of the long-term economic vitality of the downtown corridor, alleviate the parking problem, and be reflective of historic Roswell? And I think everybody understands that responsibility. And we can put that on 22. So look, these are the things we're going to do. Check, 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 check. That's important. So Great question, Christine. All right, with that being said, since we have 22 minutes to a city council meeting and nobody else has any, no objections, I'm going to move that, do I have to get an adjournment? No, yeah. Do I have a motion to adjourn this workshop? Thank you, Member Hall, for the first motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Hills. All in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands. It is unanimous. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.